Sasha, your life's work stands as a testament to what can be achieved when curiosity, purpose, and ethical rigor converge. You've inspired a revolution of heart-centered science. In this project, we dedicate to you. May it be worthy of your brilliance, your courage, your generosity. Here's to 100 years, to the molecules that bear your mark, to the future, and we will defend your honor. To cognitive liberty, to science, to Sasha.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for being here. I'm with Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I'm the Director of Strategy and Development and longtime Shulgin fan, and it's an honor. Today we gather to honor the centennial of a man who didn't just explore the boundaries of consciousness, he synthesized them. And yes, he introduced MDMA to psychotherapy. He synthesized and tested hundreds of compounds, documenting them with rigorous science and poetic introspection. But perhaps the most impressive was that Sasha lived with integrity, curiosity, and with a relentless commitment to the idea that self-knowledge is a human right. Here at SSDP, we're proud to be honoring the Shulgin legacy through a years-long legal battle against the DEA, marking the first time that harm to scientific research is being formally considered in a drug scheduling case. The compounds in question, DOI and DOC, were synthesized by Sasha himself, and the legal challenge is being led by PhD students who use these very compounds in their academic research every day. When we opened up our case at the DEA, the leading expert on hallucinogenic substances actually began our week-long hearing by reading Sasha's words aloud in court, quoting his experiences with DOI and how it brought sadness. But what the DEA's expert on hallucinogenic drugs didn't read was what Sasha understood so deeply, which was that not every compound is meant for the masses. Some are meant to be probed, to teach, to stretch the limits of what the mind can endure, and to give science new tools for discovery. He once said DOI was more like a laboratory scalpel than a storytelling elder. And yet that scalpel has helped thousands of neuroscientists understand serotonin, inflammation, and perception more clearly than ever before. Today, the Shulgin Foundation and Students for Sensible Drug Policy is honored to be carrying his legacy forward. And at SSDP, we work with young people who, just like Sasha, are led by curiosity, empathy, and a belief in science over stigma. They're not just learning from Sasha's work, but we're defending it. When the DEA attempted to schedule DOI and DOC, it was SSDP students and researchers who stood up, filed legal challenges, and said that his research and knowledge wouldn't be stifled. I'm proud to stand up here with my SSDP team. And just like the Shulgins, SSDP is setting precedent. Because when research is silenced, so is hope. So today, we don't just raise a glass to a man who made molecules, we're honoring a movement, a legacy of scientific freedom, intellectual defiance, and radical compassion. We're proud to carry that torch forward, standing with the next generation of researchers who, just like Sasha, we dare to imagine a better future. One molecule, one amazing team, and one act of courage at a time. Cheers. Thank you.
What a crew. One more time for them. Come on. Yeah. Wow. Y'all look great. I'm constantly impressed at how well deadheads and burners clean up. You got your gala attire on tonight. This is amazing stuff. And we're going to continue the show right now with another wonderful presentation from someone doing incredible work in this space to further the life legacy of Alexander Sasha Shulgin and to develop human-validated and overlooked drugs. So very critical work here. Please give a very warm welcome to Shlomi Raz of Negev Labs. All right, here we go. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. It is my profound honor and pleasure to be with you here tonight to honor the centennial of Alexander Shulgin, gifted chemist, intrepid explorer, but also a quiet but radical influencer of medicine and culture. Now, we remember Sasha for all the drugs that he explored and discovered, but I would like to remember him tonight for some of the questions and some of the mysteries that he uncovered. What are the full therapeutic potentials of these compounds? And how do we go about really unlocking them? Sasha will forever be known for incredible medicines like MDMA, 2CB. But everyone in this room knows that he explored hundreds of compounds. Now, some of those compounds were too intense. Some of those compounds lasted way too long. Some of those compounds didn't really move the needle in terms of being a psychedelic. And one of those compounds seemingly really didn't move the needle, but yet Sasha was really interested in. It was a drug that he eventually called Ariadne. He thought it was very special. Let me read to you some of his, I would say, poetry describing the drug. He says, "How do you discover a new drug for a malady that does not yet exist in an experimental animal? One way is to stumble upon it in the search of new psychedelics." Well, he stumbled upon something very interesting. So Ariadne, no matter how much you take, it's not a psychedelic, and yet it had very profound effects. Sasha described it as having something along the lines of an energetic effect, increasing his interest in the world, his mood, his sense of living, of experiencing pleasure and well-being. Now, Sasha wasn't the only person interested in Ariadne. Little known fact, Bristol Labs, the precursor of Bristol Myers Squibb, was also very interested in Ariadne. The head of Bristol Labs research actually gave Ariadne to the entire board of directors of Bristol Labs, right? Can you imagine? Before they began clinical development. Apparently, it was a big success because they greenlit the program. Now, Bristol Labs between 1974 and 1977 gave Ariadne to over 400 patients in nursing homes all around the United States. Now, they didn't prove that the drug was a treatment for senility. Now, senility is a vague catch-all clinical term that really doesn't mean anything today. But what they discovered in that clinical trial was that Ariadne could profoundly treat the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, both the motor symptoms and, crucially, the apathy and depression that afflicts so many patients with Parkinson's disease. But Bristol discontinued the program for obscure reasons. Sasha was not so easily deterred. He approached Bristol and he said, "Give me back the drug. Give me back the patents, and I'll pursue it." In fact, one of the documents that we recovered is actually in Sasha's handwriting, sketching out the clinical trial design for a trial in what he described as amotivational elderly. Now, Sasha was never able to execute that trial. He was never able to get a financial sponsor to back him. And it seemingly was the end of the road for Ariadne. The patents were expiring and there was no money for it. Until decades later, when the Alexander Shulgin Research Institute was founded. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Paul Daley, one of the founders and president of the Alexander Shulgin Research Institute, to describe his work on Ariadne.
We did form the ASRI. This is a concept that Sasha had toyed with in the early 1980s, but never really expanded to the point of it being a real business endeavor. He may have just needed letterhead so that he could order chemicals, but in any event, we did found this in 2021. Ann Shulgin and my colleague Nick Cozy from University of Wisconsin and I. And our objective was to both extend lines of work that Sasha had started, come up with some new lines of investigation, and kind of significantly in terms of Ariadne, start to investigate ways that we could revivify, revisit some of Sasha's classic compounds that are really not accessible for further development because they've been put in the public domain. So we set out a campaign of developing new intellectual property, doing patent applications, and Shlomi's company came along at kind of a crucial point and licensed out of 2 of those families of compounds. And I think we've got some very interesting candidates, some of which are closely related to Ariadne itself, and others that I think show great promise, although we have to figure out exactly how we want to apply these things. So some of them, in fact, create what I would describe as the microdosing effect, but with 2 sort of significant safety factors. Even if you push dose, they never tilt over into a full psychedelic effect. And secondly, there's a sort of a bête noire of the whole microdosing world, which is serotonin 2B activation. There are, a family of 15, I think, serotonin receptors. All of them probably are involved with psychedelic responses to one degree or another. But the 2B is a bit of a problem. It is expressed in great quantity on the heart valves. And if you chronically stimulate it, those heart valve cells will start to multiply, the valves become thickened, and they eventually start to become incompetent and leak, and that's a problem. So there have been commercial, successful otherwise pharmaceuticals that had that problem that were pulled off the market. So in any event, we're continuing that work, finding new partners like Shlomi and Negev Labs, and hope to push things forward into a murky future.
So, what's that future look like? I don't know all of it, but I know some of it. And so I wanted to share with some of that with you tonight. Working with Paul and ASRI, Negev Labs is re-examining Ariadne. What's incredible is now we can use modern tools to evaluate Ariadne, understand it better, but also we've uncovered thousands of pages from the original Bristol Labs clinical trials, and we've come to a conclusion. They left a blockbuster on the shelf. The therapeutic potential of Ariadne, we think, is vast, and we are committed to unlocking that vast therapeutic potential. Working with ASRI, we have developed a new version of Ariadne, which is very, very similar to Ariadne. And I'm excited to announce for the first time publicly that we will begin clinical trials of Ariadne in 2026. This is not just about another clinical trial or intellectual property. This is Sasha's vision that he held on to for decades, now finally coming to a reality. And I couldn't be more excited to be a part of that. Now, what do we do at Negev Labs? We find overlooked drugs with human data, and we build companies around them. And the clearest example of that mission is what we're doing with Paul and what we're doing with Ariadne, right? It's Sasha's molecule with modern technology and clinical rigor. And we're thrilled to be developing it. So, to wrap up, it is delightful to be here on Sasha's 100-year birthday. And to remember Sasha, not just for the drugs that he developed, and not just for the things that we know him to be in terms of his books, but crucially, to re-explore the mysteries and the questions that he left behind. Now, we're also here to support the foundation. It's incredible work in sustaining and supporting the legacy of Sasha and making events like this possible. But crucially, everyone here hopefully is committed to answering some of the questions and mysteries that Sasha left behind. What is the potential of these drugs? At Negev Labs and ASRI, we are committed to unlocking the vast therapeutic potential of Ariadne and transforming it into a medicine. And in that way, adding just one more amazing drug to the legacy of Sasha Shulgin so that he will be forever remembered by drugs like MDMA and like Ariadne. Thank you.
Holy guacamole. One more time for Negev Labs. What's up, everybody? Wow. How about that? I like to think about what kind of molecules would Sasha be developing today if he was still around? I got one, I think, okay? What about like a molecule that induces ego death in machine intelligences? We could call it chat DMT. Yeah? Yeah. Oh, you guys look so good tonight. I don't know if it's the light in here or the 2CB I took, but everyone looks amazing. So I'd really like to welcome another wonderful contributor to this wonderful space we all inhabit right now. And this next leader of this organization I'm going to introduce is actively working for the betterment of women's health through integrated psychedelic research and community-led healing. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Melissa Whippo of Deva Collective. Please come to the stage. Come get your time in the spotlight. Mwah.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm really honored to be here. My name's Melissa Whippo, and I'm the founder of Deva Collective. We are a nonprofit researching women's health and psychedelics. We have a booth across the street or down the way. Come see us. And I'm really honored to talk about the legacy of Sasha Shulgin on his 100th birthday. I really feel, even though I didn't get to meet him in person, or Ann, we had our first fundraiser for Deva Collective at the Shulgin farm last year in October. It was a really beautiful event. They have a beautiful San Pedro garden. If you don't know much about mescaline was one of Sasha's favorites, as I understand. And mescaline is the active ingredient in San Pedro, which is what our first study is about. But I really also want to appreciate Ann, because behind every good man in the psychedelic movement is a good woman. In getting to know Wendy Tucker, her daughter, it's been really special to feel Ann's spirit supporting our work. And really, I feel both of them cheering us on for the community that we're building together. We didn't just want to do a fundraiser for our organization. We also wanted to raise money for the Shulgin Foundation. So I'm really honored to be part of this community and hope to speak to some of you more about women's health and psychedelics and the legacy of Ann and Sasha Shulgin. Thank you.
All right, let's keep this party going. Everybody, this is too much fun. This should be illegal. Oh, wait, it is. We're working on that. All right. Thank you all for indulging me. I'm having almost too much fun. No such thing, Sasha would say. So our final presentation for this portion of the evening, I'm elated to welcome Stephanie Karzon Abrams, talking about the chemistry of joy. Where you at, Stephanie?
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Karzon Abrams. I'm a neuropharmacologist and the founder of Beyond Consulting. We serve visionary organizations in the integrative medicine, plant medicine, and psychedelic space. I'm honored to be here today as we honor 100 years of Sasha Shulgin. Though if he were here, I'd imagine he'd say time is a construct, hand you a glass of wine, and wax poetic about a very complex compound that makes you cry about the beauty of moss. Sasha invited us into new ways of seeing ourselves. He approached chemistry like some might approach jazz, improvisational, intuitive, bold, and a little mischievous. And while we honor Sasha, we must also honor Ann, a cosmic partnership where the chemist and the psychotherapist came together and turned psychedelic science into poetry. Ann knew how to navigate both the inner and outer cosmos. She took the molecular and made it meaningful. If Sasha opened the doors of perception, then Ann helped us walk through them without tripping over our own existential baggage. Together, they were joy pioneers. In TCAL, Ann wrote, "One of the most agreeable things about getting older is that you discover that lovemaking doesn't have to end and that the intensity of response doesn't necessarily diminish. What changes is the style, the pace, the degree of urgency, slower, more sensual, more full of the kind of joy that only comes when both partners are comfortable in their own skins and in each other's presence. This speaks to the intimacy of truly being alive. It speaks to the kind of joy that Sasha and Ann knew wasn't about peak experiences and fireworks, but about staying, softening, slowing down, enough to feel the miracle of connection cell by cell. They taught us that chemistry was not only meant for the lab. It was in the gaze between lovers, in the silence between words, and the way that a single molecule could open 1,000 doors in a person. And that joy, the joy that comes from being comfortable in your own skin and in the presence of someone who truly sees you, is perhaps the most transformative experience of all. I recently had the privilege of visiting the Shulgin farm for a talk series that I co-created called The Chemistry of Joy. The farm is a place where beakers met beauty and where a garden shed turned into one of the most quietly revolutionary chemistry labs in history. In this talk, we explore joy as an undercurrent to life. It's what carries us through, always there, humming softly like an inner music. Sasha and Ann understood that joy is one of the most renewable resources, regenerated through connection, curiosity, and courage. Sasha once said, "There's no such thing as psychedelic drugs, only psychedelic people." Psychedelic people aren't defined by substances. They're defined by wonder and by humility, by the willingness to ask what else in life is truly possible. And maybe by also owning a very large, obscure collection of glassware. Today, on what would have been Sasha's 100th lap around the sun, we celebrate more than a man. We celebrate a legacy, a chemistry of joy that continues to ripple through generations. So thank you, Sasha and Ann, for reminding us that science can be sacred, that love can be both a person and a laboratory, and that joy is woven in the fabric of our entire existence. Happy 100th, Sasha. May your molecules continue to dance in the minds and the hearts of joy pioneers everywhere. Thank you. Thank you.
I got talked into one more here, so we're going to do one more. It's wonderful to see a labor of love here. Everybody's here because we're devoted to this activism and to this research. It's not for the money, I think, because anybody know how you make a small fortune in the psychedelics industry? You start with a big fortune. There it is. And with that being said, isn't music just the most beautiful thing to carry this experience forward for all of us? It's a touch point of the psychedelic experience. It always has been. And with that being said, I'm honored to introduce Kyla Witt of Red Rock String Quartet. Give it up one time. Kyla.
So did everyone enjoy the lightning storm? So my name is Peter Vitale. It's really magical to have everyone here in this room. And Kate Costello, who's been helping produce this event, said a week ago, could have been a day ago, I don't really know anymore, that she said, don't forget, we have 2 angels. And it really allowed me to take a breath, to think about Ann and Sasha enjoying this night. And for Wendy to have this moment to celebrate her mom and Sasha. It was 2 years ago we had the memorial for Ann. Mm-hmm. And it was 2 years ago we were here at this conference. And then we established Shulgin Foundation that summer and got to work inviting everyone to Shulgin Farm. And if you haven't been to the farm, I hope that you come visit and sign up for our newsletters so that we can communicate with you about events that are happening. And we have a fun evening. We have talks coming up from some amazing speakers with stories. And we have dancing and more food, hopefully. Plenty more drinks of all kinds. And come find us. Anyone you see that has a lanyard or that looks like they have information to share, or come find us at the Shulgin Foundation booth. Again, thank you very much.
I'll just say also, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is a big day. Sasha, happy birthday. And I know right now it's amazing to think that Mom and Sasha are with us and they're together, which is really wonderful to think about. And Sasha, we're continuing your legacy. Mom, we're continuing your legacy. And all the work that people are doing here, it's so incredible. And Sasha would be so amazed and so proud to see what everybody's doing. It's all of our legacy, really. Their legacy is our legacy. So thank you all for being here so much.
Thank you. Peter, the Pied Piper of the Shulgin Farm, thank you so much. Thank you, Wendy. Hi, everyone. So good to be here with you. It's so exciting and thrilling that Sasha turned 100 on the eve of the kickoff of the Psychedelic Science Conference. Miraculous. I really do feel their presences with us, and it's so incredible to just understand the depth of their work and the fact that we have these giants whose shoulders we stand upon. Around the world, there are, I'm Liana Gillooly. I am a part of the Shulgin Farm Foundation. I wear a few hats around here, and I'm honored to be facilitating and emceeing for the next hour of rollicking, ruckus storytelling with all these incredible psychedelic luminaries that were peers of Sasha and Ann. And I'm going to start by sharing just a few things. Around the world, there are sacred sites, there are mountaintop monasteries, there are headwaters of great rivers and ancient temples carved into stone that have long been revered by seekers. And for many people, these places are not symbolic, they are vital. They are the origins of life and culture and cosmology. They are places of pilgrimage, of ceremony, and of remembering. And as a person enculturated in the West and drawn to both science and mysticism, I honor that many of the sacraments that I hold sacred were emerged not from temples or forests, but from the laboratory. And for me, Sasha Shulgin's laboratory is sacred and hallowed ground. When I first made pilgrimage to the Shulgin Farm in 2010, it was made clear to me that this was no ordinary invitation. The people welcomed me onto the land. I could tell they were made of a certain wood. They carried a rare blend of humility, reverence, and a quiet brilliance. and there was a felt sense that they could be trusted. I got to meet Ann and Sasha, and I couldn't help but notice the mischievous twinkle in their eyes, which was shared by their comrades. I got the sense that they had found those who were making the good kind of mischief in the world. And it was clear that a specific culture had taken root around the farm, a culture that reflects the very best of what psychedelic communities can be. One shaped by rigor and respect, curiosity and care, merrymaking and moral inquiry. It's a place where chemistry and cosmology can dance together. So here on Sasha's 100th birthday, we recognize what an extraordinary gift it is that this farm still exists. This is a place that is a living taproot of our movement. And similar to sacred headwaters of ancestral traditions, it holds the potential to stabilize and nourish all that grows from it. And as our field continues to morph and to change and to grow, this place continues to offer us a compass. It is a reminder of continuity and care in a time of rapid change. And it is continually a gift that is offered by the spirit of Sasha and Ann. And so we must honor and we must preserve it, but not as a museum piece, but as a living, breathing touchstone. It's a sacred site in our modern mythos. It is a home for the spirit of psychedelic inquiry to keep evolving with grace. So with that, I'm going to start kicking it off and handing it over to our great storytellers, beginning with the indomitable Maria Mangini, who is, Maria is a board member of the Shulgin Foundation and has been a family nurse midwife for 25 years. She has written extensively on the impact of psychedelic experiences in shaping the lives of her contemporaries and has worked closely with many of the most distinguished investigators in this field. Her current project is the development of a thanatology program for the study of death and dying. Maria.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I'm one of the fortunate people who got to experience Ann and Sasha directly as mentors and teachers. And I actually observed that Sasha was willing to hold out that he was an alchemist, but I don't think I ever heard him hold out that he was a trickster. And in the true sense of what tricksters are, oftentimes his trickster reality kind of sneaked up on people. Tricksters are ultimately go-betweens that negotiate the boundary between people and God, between man and spirit. And like the trickster who knows the secrets of magical efficacy and gives humankind the most ingenious tools and the most useful information, Sasha could synthesize something that never existed anywhere in the universe before and find out what it does and bring back the results and their potential for benefit in the community. Those things were often surprising, and they impacted lots of us in ways that we could never have expected. But that was only one of Sasha's trickster phenomena. And the other one was that he was an incredibly sneaky joker. He really, I had a very pleasant airplane ride today with someone who participated in the reverse treasure hunt at the farm recently and found in the library where Sasha's personal books are kept some joke books that contain compendia of different kinds of limericks. Sasha was often able to sneak a smutty limerick up on you when you weren't looking. And I think he wrote a great many limericks like this one. When Lady Chatterley swoons, her breasts pop out like balloons. But her butler stands by with hauteur in his eye and pops them back in with warm spoons. Another favorite humorous line for Sasha's attacks on our consciousness is a thing called a paraprosdokian. Now, a paraprosdokian is a joke in which the speaker misleads us into thinking one thing and then suddenly changes the direction with an unexpected twist of what he's saying. So, I told my doctor that I broke my arm in 2 places. He told me not to go to those places. I've had a wonderful evening. Unfortunately, this wasn't it. Sasha had the excellent talent of delivery with diversion, and he was able to catch us off guard. oftentimes he would be telling what I thought was a perfectly ordinary story, only to have the joke kind of leap out of it at the end, like this one. Gandhi walked barefoot most of the time, which produced an impressive set of calluses on his feet. He also ate very little, which made him rather frail, and with his odd diet, he suffered from terrible bad breath. That made him a super-calloused, fragile mystic hexed by halitosis. Sasha, I'm so glad that we're laughing on your 100th birthday in a way that you've made all of us laugh so often in your life. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Stamets, who clearly needs no introduction.
I think Sasha and Ann will be so proud of all of you. So thank you for continuing their legacy, and happy birthday, Sasha. One of the things that I think really has come through for those of us who had the honor and pleasure of knowing them is Sasha and Ann were buddies. They were best friends. They joked together, they played together, they were very mischievous and shared in great humorous acts. I first got to know Sasha and Ann well at the 1997 ethnobotany conferences in 1970 and 1998 in Palenque. Anybody here at those events? Yep. Epic. During the Zapatista Revolution, with the federales with the automatic weapons walking, through our facility, the conference center. That was fun. So then Sasha invited him up to the Millennium Mushroom Conference in 1999, and I realized that I'm a deadhead. I knew the Merry Pranksters, Ken Kesey, and the whole family, and I knew these psychedelic scientists, and I thought, wow, why don't I bring them together for this epic conference? And so it was the Millennium Mushroom Conference in 1999, Brighton Bush Hot Springs. And it was a fabulous conference. It was focused mostly on mushrooms. And there was a costume ball. And then Sasha and Ann were introduced as Lord and Lady Sasha and Ann Shulgin. And they were great pompous. They would come into the main hall all dressed up in animalistic attire. Sasha was a wolf. And that costume ball went into this rave. And we had so many different species of psilocybes in a giant witch's brew, which everyone ingested. Now, just to give you an idea, and I'm not making this up, psilocybe baeocystis, cyanescens, cyanofibulosa, psilocybe cubensis, strictipes. We had a psilocybe colosa. We had so many different species of psilocybe. I've never seen so many species of psilocybe in one brew at one time. And 140 people ingested the brew. I lost control of the conference. I said, I'll never organize another conference again. And it was a fabulous time. And the good news is Les Blank, the famous filmmaker, was hired, and we filmed the entire conference. And my brother Bill also did B-roll. And so we have many hours of footage of that conference. And Sasha and Ann are interviewed, I think, for almost 2 hours. And we found all the footage. And we were able to donate it to the Sasha and Ann Shulgin Foundation. So you folks will all be able to see this footage. Again, and one last thing. So after the conference, there was another conference several months later. So Sasha and Ann came up to visit me at my farm, and we decided to drive to another country together. I won't admit what the country was, but the conference was a psychedelic conference. And so Sasha and Ann drove with me, and we drove up to the border. I go, oh, shit, we can't tell them we're going to a psychedelic conference. They'll let us into the country, right? So what are we going to do? And I go, I have an idea. Trust me. Bad idea. So we go up to the border, and the border immigration officer asked, well, why are you coming into this country? And I said, oh, we're going to a restaurant conference. And the immigration officer looked at me and said, I don't think so. We didn't know what to say, and now I'm caught in this loop, right? And yeah, that's the ticket, Stamets, yeah. So we persevered, and he noddingly approved us, and we got into the country. And then I got a scolding from Sasha Shulgin saying, why didn't you just tell them the truth? And I thought, you're right. You should never be an apologist for your interest in psychedelics. So I learned a lesson that day.
Aw, thank you so much. Speaking of never apologizing for her interest in psychedelics, we have Amy Emerson up next, who is the founding CEO and former CEO of Lykos Therapeutics and is also a seed crystal steward of the Shulgin Foundation. Amy.
Thank you. What an honor to get to speak at Sasha's birthday. When I think about how I found my way into this field, it always brings me back with a lot of joy to Sasha and Ann. I first saw them speak at the Mind States Conference in 1997, and like Paul, got to know them better at the Entheobotany Conference. I was in awe. I wanted more. I read Pickard, and I just couldn't believe how lucky I was to get to experience Sasha and Ann, how they were as a couple and how they treated their community. They talked with such knowledge and wit and wisdom. So I followed them to the Entheobotany Conference in Mexico. It was a small group. Wendy was there. I think she met her husband there. And that's where I got to see really up close, really how remarkable they were and what they had created. They shared their knowledge so freely. They carried so much strength, intelligence, and generosity. There was a lot of storytelling. Fun was essential in this community. And Sasha especially loved the very suggestive twist of a word, as you heard from Maria, and some great limericks. And one of my first memories, actually, from that conference was sitting at a table with my husband, Paul, and a few other early arrivers, including Terrence McKenna, who, when Sasha walked in, said, and Terrence stood up and said this, and I cannot do his voice, so you'll have to imagine it. Well, 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 there he is, the Willy Wonka of psychedelics. The experience at those early conferences and events shaped so much of my life for the last 20 years. I've been working on MDMA, and it's been a real privilege. And being invited into the farm for Easter and 4th of July deepened that feeling of privilege. When I saw the community that was gathered there, there was so much that of valuing of science, of healing, curiosity, mentorship, humor, and respect. It was a window into what was possible beyond the boundaries of the traditional research world that I came from. And it all happened at potlucks, around kitchen tables, and in a lab that looked more like a potting shed in a magical garden. Molecules, meaning, and a beautiful mix of rigor and reverence. So I feel, again, just so privileged to be up here and thankful for being brought into that community. And my wish for Sasha's birthday is that this group and others help make that legacy live on.
And speaking of legacies, next up, I would love to invite up Zach Leary. Zach is a prominent voice in today's psychedelic renaissance with over 30 years of experience as a facilitator, researcher, meditation teacher, and advocate. He is the son of counterculture icon Timothy Leary, and he has a new book out. Zach.
Hey, guys. Wendy and Peter, thank you for having me. Happy birthday, Sasha, 100 years. Oh, my goodness. Stephanie said something really interesting in her talk. She said that Sasha's chemistry was a little bit like jazz, and that is kind of how I wanted to start my story. Jazz can be daring, experimental, improvisational, but also has order to it. Miles Davis said about jazz, in order to play outside, you have to learn to play inside. And Sasha, there's no question, he played inside so well, so fastidious, with so much rigor and so much detail, but boy, could he play outside. Sometime in the mid-90s-ish, a friend of mine, a fantastic artist named Dean Chamberlain, who's a wonderful light painter who did some amazing portraits of a lot of the great psychedelic luminaries, went to go visit Sasha and Ann to set themselves up for the portrait that he would do of them. This wasn't the actual portrait setting session itself, but it was kind of the pre-meeting. I decided to go along. We go up. Ann greets us. Where's Sasha? He's in the lab. Go say hi. We go to the lab. And we say, hey, Sasha, how's it going? And Dean says, what are you working on? Well, you guys have done this 2CB, right? I sent a bunch down to Timothy, right? You guys did some of that, yeah? And we said, yeah, I did, but Al Jorgensen's kind of got the most of it, so we didn't get too much of it, but we tried it. Okay, great. You got to try this. We're working on this new thing. And this is a long time ago now. I was a young man. I don't think I was really in the community as more as I was sort of just of the community. I just was in it, He reached down from the cabinet and suddenly turned Dean and I into data, into living data. And I am so incredibly proud of the story and so incredibly fortunate to have had this experience, for him to reach down from the shelf, give us this 2CB derivative that he was currently working on right there in real time, and said, go ahead and take it. See what happens. Half an hour later, you feeling anything? No, not so much. Okay. 45 minutes later, you feeling anything? Yeah. Writes it down. An hour later, how you guys doing? Okay. And wrote it down again. And we just spent, the next several hours. Probably my recollection of it is the several hours was probably about 2 or 3 too many. And we did communicate that back to him. Wow, this one's a little long, man. But yeah, nonetheless, and so that was just such an incredible experience. And trust me when I say this, even growing up the way that I did, I do not take these stories for granted. I realize how incredibly fortunate I am to have been exposed to psychedelics, and in this way, and the last thing I just want to say is, as we move into this next sort of Renaissance, rebirth movement phase, evolution of psychedelics, we often talk about indigenous cultures in a very specific way, and rightly so, as well we should, especially as it relates to the plant medicines. But when it comes to the synthetics and keeping the memory of Ann and Sasha and so many others alive, we are the indigenous culture of MDMA. We are the indigenous culture of 2CB, of LSD. They haven't been around for thousands of years, but if we do it all right, for 1,000 years from now, the memory will be kept alive. So it's up to us.
It's powerful to think about what the culture around 2CB and MDMA might be like in 1,000 years. So next up, we have another experimental person. We have Dölen, who is a Turkish-American neuroscientist and professor at UC Berkeley, with adjunct roles at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. She is also a seed crystal steward of the Shulgin Farm. Gul.
Hello, everybody. Okay, I am going to tell a story back in 2005 when I met Sasha and Ann. And this happened at MIT, where I did my PhD. And at the time, they had just opened up this new building, and it was bringing together all of the neuroscientists on campus under one roof. It was a really big deal. They invited neuroscientists from all over the world to be at the event. And then as the special guests, as the speakers, they invited about 8 or so Nobel laureates. And I won't tell you their names because I'm going to say something that might embarrass them. So they all, these are very famous scientists who discovered everything from the molecular structure of DNA to, RNA rearrangements to, the basics of the immune system, how it gets encoded by the genome. And they each got up there and they said some really ludicrous things about the brain. They knew nothing about the brain. They were, mostly molecular biologists. But, once you win the Nobel Prize, you think that you can speak on and on about anything. And then Sasha got up there, and he was about the same age as everybody else. And he was really the only lucid speaker amongst the group. And he got up there and he started describing some of the molecules that he had worked on, some of the molecules he had created. And he, described, moving a methyl group here to over here, and then I added this side chain. And then he described the effects on consciousness that these chemical manipulations had. And I can't really convey it to you, but to a room full of neuroscientists, this was like magic, right? Because here was somebody explaining, here's a molecule, and you put it in your mouth, or you ingest it in some other way, and it changes, it alters consciousness. And for a neuroscientist, this is actually the gold standard of being able to get at the big questions of neuroscience. My lab, we focus on the little questions. There's a famous professor at Harvard who says the bigger the question, the smaller the answer. The smaller the question, the bigger the answer. And I've kind of kept my career around that motto for a long time. But here was Sasha giving us an opportunity to ask the big questions and get the big answers. And this was, I think, really, really inspiring to so many neuroscientists. At that time, psychedelics were still very much not considered serious science. It was, background work. But, the number of neuroscientists I know who became neuroscientists because they took psychedelics and because they had this experience of a chemical altering their consciousness, I maybe it's selection bias, but it's somewhere in the 80 to 90% in my experience. And so I just wanted to share that story because Sasha, I later met him again at the farm now that I've moved back to the Bay Area. And Sasha's work really continues to influence the way that I think about the brain and really fosters the hope that we're going to get at those big questions with big answers. So that's it. Thank you.
That little feedback was perfect because if you've ever heard that sound, then this makes sense to you. I'm introducing Leonard Pickard. What's that sound? Allegedly responsible for 90% of the world's LSD. He served 20 years of 2 life sentences before receiving compassionate release in 2020. And he was released into Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I had just moved back to, and through Leonard, who I met thanks to Synergy Ranch and Tango, I got to meet Adele Getty and Michael Williams. And here in Santa Fe, we're in Colorado, but there in Santa Fe in New Mexico, we have some amazing work happening at the state level. And on September 7th in Santa Fe, Limina Foundation, one of our sponsors here tonight, which is Adele and Michael, are having a conference called Enchanted State. I encourage you to look it up and come see more of Leonard.
Thank you, Jim. Yes. A clandestine laboratory 40 years ago. Remote mountain environment, 12,000 feet. I'm sitting on 1,000 kilograms of something called 3,4,5-trimethoxybenzaldehyde. 1,000 kilograms, making mescaline hemisulfate dihydrate, long, beautiful needles. And I came across a very difficult portion of the synthesis. I could only turn to my personal hero I've never met, had read all of his papers since the age of 21, and that was Sasha. So I summoned courage and wrote a letter to Sasha and Ann. Amazingly, a few weeks later, the letter came back, inviting me to his courses at San Francisco State. I appeared and smiled through the entire semester at the beauty of his speech. My cheeks hurt at the end of every class. I was invited to the home, to the farm. It was a magnificent night. The sky of black panes were connecting the stars, and moonlight was falling down upon the earth. And Sasha and Ann, bathed in the moonlight, were opening their journals for decades. Beautiful inscriptions of elegant molecules. Sasha could rotate stereoisomers in his mind as he talked, his eyes twinkled. A great bear of a man, 6'4", very embracing. You got hug going in to the farm, you got hug coming out. Thumbing through all this laboratory notebook, and said, well, where does it say Eureka? You thought that was Ariadne, perhaps. So many memories of Sasha. London, Amsterdam with Albert Hoffman, Heidelberg, that sort of thing. I remember one Christmas, several Christmases in Sasha and Ann's kitchen with a few friends, as he told stories and talked of chemistry incessantly, always with the most beautiful heart. And I was reminded of Dickens, speaking of the poor children of London, and their faces looked as though sitting before their first Christmas tree. And that's how the faces around the table looked, listening to Sasha and Ann, like children at their first Christmas tree, like all of us tonight look, in remembering his loving legacy. And you, who have the future in your hands, carrying that heart forward. The last time I spoke to Sasha, just a moment, Sasha in Harvard, before the world's great neuroscientist, looking sternly at this fellow from the West Coast doing all these exotic psychedelic molecules. And Sasha dismantled that stern attitude by telling stories of how at 19, as a Harvard undergraduate, he concocted a bomb in Wigglesworth, the dormitory, and exploded it in Harvard Yard. And of course, they broke into laughter and cheer, and then Sasha had them from that point forward. The last time I spoke to Sasha, I was buried in a maximum security prison in the hole, where we only isolated cell for 6 months. And the only phone call we could make was 15 minutes once a month. And so the cuff port in a 300-pound door opened, and the phone was handed to me. And I called Sasha and Ann. The last time I heard his voice. And I asked him, Sasha, do you still play the balalaika? A Russian descent, he had a beloved balalaika. And he said, yes. And then he, in whimsical way, he queried me, how many strings does a balalaika have? I went, 5? He never put down his students. There were only 3. But he said, yes. And the last words he said to me, where there are heavenly harmonics, there are heavenly harmonics. And so I trust tonight, with the chords of our hearts stirred, at the memories of this loving couple, that Sasha will somehow hear us. And thank you, Sasha. And thank you.
Just gonna need a moment to wipe the tears from my eyes. Can you feel the room? Can you feel the heavenly harmonics that are with us tonight? Thank you, Leonard, for that invocation. Next up is another man that doesn't really need much of an introduction around here, and he's a man who's taught me about legacy and what it means to work within a lineage and what it is to stand on the shoulders of giants. And that man is Rick Doblin, who is our wonderful host for the week.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Oh, I'll use this. Okay. The story I want to tell about Sasha took place in 1992, and it's really a story of courage, and it's a story of transformation. And to set the scenes, in 1990, a new group of people took over at the FDA, and they wanted to explore new ways to evaluate drugs, and they had the responsibility. They took it from another group for the psychedelics. And so in 1990, after repeated denials from this prior group, Rick Strassman got permission for a study with DMT to see if it could cause schizophrenia. The idea was that DMT is the only endogenous psychedelic in your brain, and potentially maybe too much of it causes schizophrenia. So it was kind of a negatively loaded study, but the FDA let it happen. And so this was the first sort of psychedelic research in decades. It was a tremendous milestone. So with Charlie Grobe and I in 1992, we presented a protocol for MDMA for cancer patients with anxiety. And it went before the same group at the FDA, and they decided that they needed to have this meeting to formally decide, the FDA advisory committee, should they really open the door to psychedelic research to look at the whole range of things, benefits included. And they decided to have this meeting, and there was 2 days before they invited the National Institute on Drug Abuse to have its animal researchers. There had been animal studies with psychedelics, and they invited these researchers for a 2-day meeting before the 1-day FDA advisory committee, and they were to decide, do they think that they wanted to see the resumption of human studies? Because at the time, the only animal research was only possible with psychedelics. You couldn't do anything with humans. And so they had this 2-day meeting, and this meeting was filled with people from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, scientists, but it also had police. So it was the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Drug Czar's Office. So it had this whole sort of spectrum of government to attend this discussion and to watch over. And Sasha was one of the speakers. And there was this general sense from the other speakers, that the animal research was becoming increasingly hard to interpret, because unless you could correlate it with human data, what are you really learning from these animal studies? So there was this kind of sense that there was some possibility that human studies would be voted on by this committee. But this is the committee that's really, or this National Institute on Drug Abuse, has been looked only basically at negative parts of psychedelics, and had really promulgated still the MDMA neurotoxicity scares and all. So when Sasha's turn to speak came, what he ended up doing was what Gould described that he'd done in 2005, what Leonard described he sort of did with him in a bit, was that he talked about structure-activity relationships, but he described it in terms of his own experience. And at this time, it was kind of it could be considered illegal. That, in the FDA, there was the analog bill that had passed. There was this sense that to properly do human research with FDA, you need to do animal studies before you get permission to get. And so here was Sasha just giving it to himself. So it was this extremely courageous step, but it was also fascinating for all the people that were there about this is what you can learn once you are doing human studies that involve the consumption of these substances that are being created, what you can learn about the brain, what you can learn about emotions. And it kind of electrified the room in a way, that there was this sense that Sasha was putting himself out in a vulnerable place to show everybody else that they should take the courage and vote yes to start human studies. And they did. And this was this key transformation when we look back to where we are now in the psychedelic renaissance. With all this research, it ended up that this decision from the National Institute on Drug Abuse researchers, coupled with the very next day was the FDA Advisory Committee that said yes to opening up the door to human research. But they also did it in a very political way. They said, we're going to review the drugs that come in for psychedelics the same way we would review big pharma, any drug that comes in from big pharma. It won't be any easier, just because there's these nonprofits. It'll be the same standards. And that led the FDA, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the DEA, the NIDA, they all just said, that's great. Nothing will ever get out the other end. So we'll just say yes. FDA is now completely in charge of opening to psychedelics. But this transformation that I saw was made by Sasha a lot. This courage, this step that he took to be vulnerable, but also to be proud kind of and daring. And I think he got that from his own experiences, and he saw the value. So that's what I honor about Sasha, his courage, and that's brought us to this day.
Ever the storyteller about the history of where we are at today. Thank you so much, Rick. Up next, we have Rachel Nuwer, who is an award-winning science journalist and the author of I Feel Love, MDMA, and the Quest for Connection in a Fractured World. She writes for outlets like the New York Times and National Geographic, and she has a focus on human connection and the natural world. Rachel, great to have you.
Thank you. Good evening. So I did not have the pleasure of knowing Sasha myself, but I did get to visit the farm, and I know that everyone who has been there can agree that it is a very magical and singular place. And I just want to give a heartfelt shout out to the Shulgin Foundation for preserving that history. It's going to be there for generations of students, scholars, and just superfans to come. Now, while I was researching this book, I also had the pleasure of talking to Ann and to many of Sasha's friends and colleagues, some of whom are here tonight. And I really did my best to capture the spirit of the man they described to me. And I'm going to read you a short excerpt tonight, and for those of you who knew Sasha, I hope it does him justice. In the tradition of scientists of yore, Shulgin investigated his creation's effects by first testing them on himself, starting at extremely low doses and working his way up. "It saves a lot of mice and dogs, believe me," he quipped. If a material proved interesting, he would introduce it to his wife, Ann, and to a research group composed of 9 to 11 trusted friends, including scientists, psychologists, and others with ample experience in psychotropic drugs. Compared to previous research on psychedelics in the 1940s and 50s, this approach was unique, not only in that it wasn't being done behind closed doors, but also because the Shulgins and their friends were primarily interested in taking these substances to flourish, said Erica Dick, a historian at the University of Saskatchewan and author of Psychedelic Psychiatry. Its distinction from taking drugs to treat or address something we might think of as a deficit or something missing. They were taking them just to be more or to be better than. As his psychedelic explorations deepened, Shulgin became completely convinced that there is a wealth of information built into us with miles of intuitive knowledge tucked away in the genetic material of every one of our cells. Access to the interior universe is normally barred, however, for those who haven't devoted a lifetime to meditation or other practices for reaching transcendence. The gift of psychedelic drugs, Shulgin realized, is that they give anyone a clear route of entry to the fathoms of the mind, an expressway to the profound that may lend answers to the deepest questions of existence, selfhood, and consciousness. It really is all in our heads, though. It's up to the individual to choose whether to use such drugs as mere entertainment or as keys for unlocking cryptic realms of being and meaning. Shulgin liked to joke that out of the hundreds of mind-altering drugs he sampled, cheap red wine was his favorite. A fast talker with a high-pitched voice and a hypomanic energy, He was equally at ease discussing science and chemistry or philosophy and literature, a true Renaissance man, his friends like to say. He also loved a good wordplay. Many who knew him still groan when recalling his famous over-the-top puns, naughty limericks, and cheesy jokes. As one Sashaism went, "Do you know how an orchestra and a bull are the opposite of one another? With the bull, the horns are in the front and the asshole is in the back." Happy birthday, Sasha.
I just wanted to thank you to all of our sponsors who really helped make this happen. And you'll hear more about them later. And all the product sponsors that have provided all these amazing things to eat and drink. And I'm going to introduce Jameis MacNiven now. We are really happy to have Jameis as one of our seed crystal stewards. He arrived at the farm, and we all fell in love. And then Jameis fell in love with an exciting project that you're going to hear about right now. And you're going to be able to see more about this project throughout the week at the conference.
Thanks, Peter. First, a confession. I'm a drug dealer. And, well, I was at Berkeley in the 60s and 70s. We were all drug dealers. But now supply doesn't seem to be such a problem, so now I'm dealing something else. I showed up at the farm one day, and you know, like many of us, I turn in a lot of different psychedelic circles. But I've discovered that the farm is very different than the others because they're sort of, well, they're houseboats, they're rolling parties, they're in the forest. But here we've got a physical location with a terrific history. We've got the lab. You've almost all been to the lab. You've got the house, you've got the grounds, and you have a meeting place where hundreds of people can gather and celebrate the legacy and the community and the future. Well, I showed up at the farm one day and I saw this project that I said, oh, I want to do that. And that is the Shulgin Pharmacology Notebook Project. So Sasha Shulgin made meticulous notes on his adventures with psychedelics. And his friends also made notes. And he kept these in 9 notebooks over the decades that are all in the office library. And maybe some of you have seen them, but they sort of go unnoticed up on the shelves. Well, then Adam Fisher had the brilliant idea of replicating these in a limited edition of 10 copies of each of the 9. And we are just starting on that project. And the publishers here from Francis from Hurtwood Press, we're all going to be in the bookstore displaying the original and the copy of the book that describes the MDMA experience with Sasha and his friends. Now, these books have tip-ins and cartoons and business cards that have all been meticulously reproduced with their original paper stocks and the tape and the wear. And when you put them side by side, you can't tell the original from the copy. And these are going to be available free to major donors. The book is free, but we do ask for a substantial donation. And you know, I'm not a rich guy, but I became the first donor. And I really believe in this project because I believe in the future of the Shulgin Foundation and the beauty of the legacy and just having us all together in community. Thank you. Oh, see us in the bookstore. We'll be in the bookstore displaying the books. All right.
I mentioned our sponsors before, and if you were in the room before, you got to hear Paul Daley and Shlomi Raz from Negev Labs talk about Ariadne. And you'll be able to watch the recording if you didn't. And I wanted to thank Negev Labs for being the founding sponsor of this event, which enabled us to move forward, secure this beautiful place, and begin planning this party. So thank you. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Shlomi. I don't know how many of you had the Dance Safe postcards that you would pick up at various places. I remember I made my way to Burning Man in 2001, fresh out of law school in Boulder, found the MAPS camp somehow, wasn't sure what it was. And it was that same summer I had all these postcards. It said all these things about drugs. Fast forward, Dance Safe is one of our Seed Crystal Steward sponsors, and that's thanks to Mitchell Gomez. So Mitchell has a story. And here Mitchell comes. I also wanted to thank Ortis Foundation, who's one of our sponsors, doing really incredible work on mental health. Thank you, Sabrina. All right, Mitchell.
Hey, everyone. So for the last 11 years, I've been stewarding DanceSafe until this last May, but I really wanted to tell this story. So when I was 22 years old, the only college I applied to when I got serious about academics was New College of Florida. And because I applied because I knew that's where you could meet Rick, Earth, and Fire, because even though they were older alums, they came back to party. And man, my plan worked. I met Rick, I met Earth, I met Fire. I probably moved more drugs than I should have, and I can say it because we're past the statute of limitations now. And Rick invited me to Burning Man 2008, Entheon Village. It was the largest psychedelic camp ever built out there. We were like 0.7% of the city. Got there in the middle of the night, had no idea where I was supposed to set up in 2 city blocks. So I picked a random spot and set up, tied off to a random RV. And when I woke up in the morning, I was going to go find Rick and figure out where I was supposed to be. Rick was in the tent next to me, and the RV I was tied to was Sasha and Ann's. And as a doughy-eyed 22-year-old, this was a few years later, but at that doughy-eyed 22-year-old, I had already loved MDMA for the better part of 9 years. I'll let you do that math. And meeting Sasha, hearing him speak, all of it was so impactful. But the thing that sticks out most in my memory is this other 20-something trying to explain some chemistry thing to Sasha. And I was like, man, what an ass to try to teach Sasha something. And instead, Sasha was so open, so receptive. He knew that there was always more to learn, that there was always things you didn't know, things other people had figured out. And keeping that with me all these years is one of the 2 big things I got from that encounter. The other was that the way that Sasha and Ann loved each other showed that the continuity of love is really real. And so, I'm so glad I got to tell Sasha in person this, but every community that I care about exists because of Sasha. And I'm so glad I was able to facilitate that donation. I've since had multiple friends also donate. I encourage you guys to do it as well, because I'm so glad we didn't have to do my crazy backup plan of moving the lab to Karzon, because that was just going to be a pain. I really do encourage all of you to support, because the work is why we're here.
All right, folks, we have just a few more people. And up next is somebody that is a very important person to Sasha Shulgin, and that is Paul Daley. Paul has been the main protege of Sasha Shulgin. He's a leading psychedelic chemist and co-founder and chief science officer of the Alexander Shulgin Research Institute. Paul.
Well, thank you for letting me up here again. I did the calculation. I first met Sasha at a psychedelics conference. At the time, I didn't know that there even were such things, but it was 48 years ago. I was just starting my last round of graduate studies at Berkeley, and he said, in his inimitable way, he said, "You're practically in my backyard. Come for a visit." So around November of 1977, I first walked into that lab that's been so aptly described this evening. And I don't know why, it took me another 20 years to go out and have a life and marriage and children and science career at a big national laboratory to realize that my heart really belonged to Sasha. So anyway, I did start to kind of learn a little bit more about the history of him. I got to know Ann, got to watch kind of the scene around the farm, which is a very unique kind of community of all sorts. Peter asked me to relate one story that I think is kind of fun. So Sasha in the early 80s wanted to have an NMR, a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. A device that would have probably been a great advance for him. These are the devices that are sort of the go-to instruments now for determining the final structure of something new that you've made or discovered. So he found one at an army base down near Monterey. They got it onto a rail car, and they railed it up to Martinez, about 10 miles away from the farm. Sasha's son Ted got a permit to forklift this device up to the farm. Now remember, the device itself at that point, these were done with big permanent magnets. You have two of them facing each other, and the magnets each are about the size of a small block Chevy V8. So they're kind of massive devices. Anyway, they cut a hole in their roof, dropped this device into one of the bedrooms with a crane, and then sealed the hole up and made it into a skylight. Well, okay, so years later, I knew that they never got it up and operating. There was some problem with the electronics, and they could never really get it rolling. So it turned out that as Sasha's health declined in around 2010, we really needed that bedroom back. And so I started kind of looking into, what was going to be involved with getting this device out, because it really kind of ate up a quarter of the room. And so I started, hitting the internet and looking for information about, how could you dismantle such a thing, because we didn't really want to cut a hole in the wall to get it out. Anyway, I ran into this description of safety around these devices, because, you don't want to have metal objects in your pockets, because they're going to get into the magnet like a black hole. Anyway, so I got to the bottom of this one account, and I realized, oh, this is a company in Livermore. Well, I worked in Livermore, so I thought, okay, I'll call these guys up. So I get on the line, talk to a receptionist, and I'd explain that there's this elderly chemist who's got a defunct NMR, and I'm looking for some advice on how to get it out of the... And she, oh, you need to talk to Joaquin. I said, okay, I'll talk to Joaquin. So I get on the line. Remember, this is about 2010. And so I say to him, okay, this is the situation. We have this device, and it's, not operating. It's not likely to ever operate again. He's going, okay. Let me ask you this. Where are you calling from? I said, well, I'm in Northern California. He said, no. What town are you talking about? I said, this is Lafayette. That wouldn't by chance be on Shulgin Road. So as it turns out, he was one of the people in 1981 that they had brought in to see if they could get this thing operating. And unfortunately, it was one of those all the king's horses and all the king's men could not get this thing running again. So I just want to say that there are so many stories about Sasha and Ann and his history and the farm. They just overflow. And it's been really the pleasure and honor of my life to contribute to this scene. With ASRI, we're hoping to keep the work going and bring out new molecules that have interesting properties that are unexpected and hopefully will better humanity and in some cases cause a little delight, because we need more delight. I just want to stress that the one thing that I've always kind of come back to with this couple was their radical welcoming and open friendship to all comers. The first time I visited Sasha in November of '77, I can remember vividly his standing down at the little landing by their dining room, and he calls out to me, "Hello, friend." And I thought to myself, I met this gentleman once, and we talked for 5 minutes, and he calls me friend. But I started to get it after more exposure. So hopefully you can all kind of carry that forward and make friends and do some good for the rest of us. Thanks.
So next I'm going to introduce Michael Silver, and then after that we have Alex and Allyson Gray and a special surprise, and then we're going to sing happy birthday. And then we're going to go out under the Colorado stars, get some air if you want. There's going to be music in here that'll be pretty exotic and fun, and lots of projections and whatnot. Music downstairs as well. I also want to thank Reunion Biosciences, one of our sponsors. They're working with the Shulgin compound called RE104 that is going to be used for postpartum depression and Sensoria research. So Sensoria will be out interviewing people throughout the night, and look out for them. They're with Dave, our videographer. So Dr. Michael Silver is professor of optometry, vision science, and neuroscience at UC Berkeley, where he also leads the Berkeley Center for the Science of Psychedelics, BCSP. Also look out for the Shulgin archive that's going to be installed at UC Berkeley thanks to a grant we just received from BCSP and Flourish Trust. So Michael, thank you for sharing a story with us.
Could we please take a moment to thank the organizers of this beautiful celebration? And I'm personally grateful to be one of the designated reminiscers tonight. I also want to share from all of us at the BCSP, the UC Berkeley Center for the Science of Psychedelics, just how thrilled we are to continue deepening our partnership with Wendy and Peter and everyone at the Shulgin Foundation. It's just been fantastic working with you all and getting to know you better. One of my earliest memories of Sasha is when I was a tender young graduate student in the 1990s, and this was at one of the Friday night dinners at John Perry's house, and Sasha and Ann were in attendance, and I was so excited to have the opportunity to share with Sasha our plans for a new experiment involving giving diisopropyl tryptamine to zebrafinch, songbirds. And diisopropyl tryptamine is a drug that changes auditory pitch perception, and we were wondering what effects it might have on song production in these songbirds. And I thought, Sasha is just going to love this. One of his chemical children being used to understand the mysteries of perception in the brain. And he was decidedly underwhelmed when he heard about the experimental plans. I was crestfallen at the time, but in retrospect, I see this as Sasha exemplifying one of his traits that doesn't get as much attention maybe as some other aspects of his personality and being, which is his scientific rigor. So we all know and love his curiosity and open-mindedness and passion, and his boundless heart and his naughty sense of humor. But also, I think a major part of Sasha and his work were his critical thinking and his rigor as a scientist. And that's a big part of why his work is enduring and influential today and a part of his remarkable legacy. So that was a lesson I learned a somewhat painful way all those years ago. And happy 100th birthday, Sasha. We miss you terribly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. All right, folks, for our very final storytelling presentation of the evening, it is my great honor to bring up Alex and Allyson Gray. Visionary artists, co-founders of the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, more extraordinary elders that I've been looking up to for a very long time.
Because I'm too short for this. Thank you. Hey, well, I was very influenced by, Sasha and Ann's, development of MDMA. And many of you know the story and have heard that we were offered our first MDMA in 1985 by a collector who wanted to buy, or who had just purchased all of the sacred mirrors, 18 paintings, for more money than we had ever been offered for anything. And he had gotten this in therapy, this MDMA, and it had really changed his life so that he turned toward Alex's art, And, but anyway, we 3 days later, we took the MDMA, and in that experience, we lay on our bed just by ourselves, not talking or touching, and we had one of only a couple of simultaneous visions in our silence. We came out of it having both seen that we were meant to build a temple for the sacred mirrors, that we were basically, that it would be like the context of a meeting place for, people who were deeply inspired, whether with or without substances. But for us both, it was substances that brought us to the entire subject of life energy, really, and the sacred mirrors that Alex had painted for years to create an environment for them, a temple for them, So we embarked on that from 1985 on, okay? I mean, becoming a nonprofit in 1996, and all that to today, where we're actually, still really wrapped in the idea of wrapping the temple in sculpture, so it can be a fully visionary encounter to come and see it. So in any case, and it's open for you, and this was really out of the experience, but there were so many other benefits, and we were so grateful to them. The other thing that really influenced me, though, was when we would go to the psychedelic conferences where they were there and they were in front of everybody, and they would put them up as Ask Sasha and Ann. And they would, and Sasha would answer all those sort of really technical chemical questions for which I knew nothing, and but that there were people in the audience, plenty of them, that's what they were there for. How do you mix up the medicine and what kind of? But Ann was there to talk about the effects of it. She was always interested in how did it come on? What was it like if you mixed it together? What were people's experiences? She was notating all of their experiences, and it really influenced me. They were so dear, and of course we resonated as couples, and that loved each other and were enduring. But also that they were willing to answer people's questions. And I was getting questions from people about art and life. And so I started my blog, and it was really a lot out of my influence of Sasha and Ann. I continue to answer those questions. So it was really a lifelong, long time kind of thing. And now, Alex, you share. Alex has a lot to share right here.
Well, I always felt that Sasha was a molecular sculptor. So I felt like he was an artist, and so his sensibility and his presentation was much more like a creative artist, because he was always thinking of the next thing and what would happen if you did this, and he was sculpting on a micro level, and it was the kind of wisdom that you could clearly see genius fulminating. There at those conferences, like the Mindstays conference, there were probably, I would say, closer to 3 people who understood what he was talking about when he was giving an explanation of certain kinds of chemical reactions. But everybody was wrapped in awe as the one person who got it was going, yeah, okay. He was going to go home that night and do something that probably changed his life, like MDMA changed our lives. Like, we got the rest of our lives out of it. We got no, you can't sell those paintings. You've got to call him up and say, thanks for this substance. No, we can't sell those paintings. We got to make a temple. And so, what? And so I had seen these frames in this vision, and MDMA and LSD were at the top of the consciousness evolutionary technology at the time, which was 1986. And so I felt so bonded that, and our lives had changed. Of course, all our lives changed, maybe even pivoted in a way on our encounter with these substances. And they all came out of this little lab, And so that the lab still exists, that it is a functioning reliquary of extraordinary importance that's in the hands of the psychedelic community, you know, and that could make a difference, and that is making a difference. And the gravity of these places from which people's lives changed. We all know the importance of the experiences we had, but the sense that we can locate it geographically gives a sense of the sacred to the farm, the pharmacy that's there. And I had the extraordinary good fortune to meet them, to love them, to see them as kind of godparents in a way of those kind of crazy conferences that were really, really edgy and really amazing. But they were always there like, Mom and Dad are here. It's okay. It's okay. You know, Ann would pat my back as I was puking off of a boat or something. It was a heavy trip. That's okay. You'll be all right. I've been there. It's okay. So the other thing was in 2010, we had broken our backs in an automobile accident, and I had been working on the Shulgin painting, and our car was on fire. And the cops came over and said, "Is there anything of any importance in your car?" And I was laying on the ground, back broken, and I said, "Why?" "Because your car's on fire, and we just wondered if there's anything you want to get out of it." And I said, "Yes." And so we got the painting out of the burning car. And it continued to work. And I felt like, in a way, God wanted us to feel the body, you know, and the sensitivity around the body, that to note that they were aging as well, and it was time to honor Sasha and Ann at a previous MAPS conference, and I got, you know, the honor to honor them, you know, by creating a painting, and they were very generous to us by humoring me. I had decided, you know, this was before the chapel existed, really, but we were trying to create a psychedelic reliquary. And so this psychedelic reliquary, Albert Hoffman had already signed the back of his painting. That converted it into a third-class relic. And so maybe I could get Sasha and Ann to sign the back of the painting, too. That would make it into a relic. It could go into the psychedelic reliquary. And so we kind of told them about that. Okay. And they were really sweet about it. They signed a suite of prints for MAPS and for us. And they were so generous and so loving. A print has been devised around this painting, and I guess it's being released tonight. Happy 100th, Sasha. Well, so, okay. Well, yeah, now, when Sasha signed the back of the painting, he made the 2CB molecule, the little chemical formula. So it's embedded there on the back, but this is an MDMA molecule, and but it has some of the hundreds of molecules radiating off from there. It's got the angels of P-Cal and T-Cal up above, a little alchemical flask above and a heart there. He was a love doctor, you know? He really helped us develop our love energy, and he loved to excite the creative urge in everyone. So I love Sasha and Ann so much, and you know, they gave us locks of their hair for the reliquary. They gave us like some of his maps as loaned us some labware. So if you want to go in there and think about them, even talk to them, it creates a sense of presence. It's just a way to bring our consciousness toward the gift that both of them were to the world. Transformative gift. So they wanted me to read this about the print. The print is being released tonight in 2 different versions, paper and metal foils. Limited edition. Timed release for 3 weeks. Proceeds will support the Shulgins and Karzon, and we will have a QR code to the collection. So, yeah, I guess it's available to anybody who wants to support in this way, too. I think the book project is super awesome. I hope that you check that out. There's so many creative ways to support the Shulgin Foundation and the farm there. Please help us preserve these valuable psychedelic assets that are still it's possible. So really help them out. I think it's happening. It's clearly happening with the love everyone here is bringing to this and the long vision. You've introduced the long vision. So, you know, it's happening. Thank you. Thanks for including us.
So that's pretty special that you can now have this special reissue. Go to Alex and Allison's website and enjoy it. Have fun with it. Art Drop, Nico Doty and his team have crafted this print, and we're really excited about this collaboration with Karzon. Thank you, Alex and Allison. So meeting Ann Shulgin's daughter, Wendy Tucker, has been the true honor of my life, and the work I've done across multiple industries with lots of wackos, and to be able to work with Wendy and the team and all of the people who made this event happen, it's really a gift and it's an honor. And we are all living in special times together now. Mm-hmm. So let's make the most of it and take care of each other. And Wendy wants to say a few words, and then we're going to sing happy birthday with a donut and a candle and a violin to honor Sasha's classical music legacy.
So Peter and I started this whole thing a couple of years ago, as he mentioned, and we have now a wonderful team of people that we work with. Maria Mangini and Keeper Trout are on our board, and Doug Rail, who's here, and will be at the bookstore at the table with the pharmacology notebooks as well. He's been a wonderful part of our team. Brad Burge has been amazing to work with. Noelle Armstrong, Jasmine Verdi. It's just been an honor to work with everybody, and our team is growing, and it'll change and grow over time, and we're just at the very beginning. This is all just starting. There's so much work to do. So I just wanted to mention them because we can't do this alone. This is all of our project. And so thank you all for being here. And it's time to say happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sasha.
All right, thank you everyone, and we do have a surprise downstairs in the gallery. There is a performer named David Starfire who's doing a surprise secret set in the gallery starting about now. So enjoy, and if you want to be a donor to help preserve Shulgin Farm for future generations, come join the ranks of the Sea Crystal Stewards that are making it happen. And go to our website. Thank you everyone.